Good afternoon, everybody. I'm so excited everyone is present in Des Moines and virtually. My name is Catherine Johnson. I'm the Executive Director of Disability Rights Iowa. And I'm very excited for our second annual mental health celebration event. We have a really engaging panel conversation to share with you today. But before we get into that, I want to first share my image description with you. So I'm about 5'7". I'm Caucasian. I have reddish, brownish, kind of depending on what my hairstylist decides at the moment, but kind of curly hair. I have freckles. I'm wearing a gray suit with white gloves. I use pronouns she, her. The reason we share our image description and our pronouns is to be as inclusive as possible. Today we have, as I said, a really great panel conversation here in Iowa City in person. So I want to welcome everyone in the room. I'm really excited you're here. I also want to welcome our community satellite attendees. We have folks in Cedar Rapids. We have folks in Sheraton, Des Moines, and Tacoma. I also like to welcome everyone that's attending virtually. So we have a live stream that's going throughout Iowa and the world. Thank you for coming. For those of you who are interested in TLE and TEU credit, we are offering that today. After today's event, you'll receive an evaluation in your email. Please fill that out, send it back to us, and we will send you the certificate. If you have questions for our panelists, email Kim Schultz at K, her last name is Schultz, SDHULTZ at BRIowa, spelled out, .org. For the folks who are in the room, you can ask questions as we go through the panel. So before we get into the conversation with the panelists, I want to give you a couple of definitions to help frame our conversation. So we're going to be talking about animals under the Americans with Disabilities Act. So the ADA, as we call it for short, is a federal civil rights law that prohibits discrimination based on disability. There are different parts of the ADA, but one part talks about requirements for state and local governments, and service animals under the ADA have those kind of requirements. There's also a section on public accommodations, which is essentially all of the things that we all do, right? Gyms, movies, eating, all of that stuff, the public accommodation. There's also an employment section. A disability under the ADA is an individual that has either a physical or mental impairment that substantially limits a major life activity. I do want to clarify that mental impairment includes mental health and cognitive impairment. A lot of people don't understand that, and that's why it's really important today that we're here to talk about this. A service animal under the ADA is a dog that's been individually trained to perform work or tasks for a person with a disability. The work or task they perform is related to that person's disability. The handler, this is the last term I'm going to give you before I get into our conversation, is the person with the disability that has a need for the service animal. So let's turn and meet our panelists. We have 6 amazing panelists with us. We have Len Sandler. Len, if you could just indicate your presence. We have Len.
Good morning.
Len
Good
is
afternoon.
our legal expert. We have Caleb Thomas. Caleb is one of our mental health professionals and experts. We have Dr. Jody Tate, another mental health expert. Zach Fox and his service animal colonel. Lindsay Fox and her service animal training, Marilyn. And then Claudia Hanna and her service animal Thor, who's back there, and service animal training Dash. So, welcome all. We're excited you're here. Let's turn now and meet the panelists. Len, we're going to start with you. What types of animals can be service animals?
Okay, I'm Len. I'm white bearded. I he, him, his. Never be confused with Michael Jackson or Fred Astaire. And I'm known as the free lawyer because I supervise settlement who represent individuals and do a lot of policy work at the College of Law. So this is a trick question that Catherine started with. What types of animals can be service animals? And a lot of it depends on where you are at the time and what law applies to you. So first, if it's in the ADA that we just talked about, restaurants, private, government, it is a dog is defined as a service animal. No other nothing, no other kind of animal. But there's also a provision in the law that says these institutions or colleges or movie theaters also may have to change their policies for a person with a disability who uses a miniature horse to provide a task or support them. It's not the same kind of requirement, but essentially there are other considerations for a miniature horse as well. So that's the first thing. If you're riding public transportation or cabs, dogs and other animals that are trained are also permitted. And a lot of cab companies don't understand that. So if I come in with a Capuchin monkey that does a task for me, then they may have to have that monkey with or allow me to ride with the monkey. How many, if for the people who live in Marion and Cedar Rapids, when we changed the code, we essentially kept the pre-ADA definition of service animal, which means you can have a dog, a miniature horse, or another trained animal, which is different than anywhere else in Iowa and in most places in the US. So that's what a service animal is.
So follow-up question for you.
Yep.
We hear a lot of different terms when it comes to assistive animals. So therapy animals, emotional support animals, service animal, psychiatric animal. What, in like a really short answer, 10 seconds or less,
Okay.
what's the difference between a service animal and an emotional support animal? And is that?
Yes, it's important. First of all, if it's a service animal, it's a working animal. Consider it an appliance. Consider it the same as an augmentative communication device, a wheelchair, any other thing that's used by a person with a disability. And in the next stage, there are actually robots being developed, and there's just a competition. So we may deal with dogs differently. The idea is there has to be a cycle that goes through to be trained. First of all, there's a behavior by the handler, and it's usually, and we're talking someone with mental illness, cognitive or psychiatric. The behavior shows that they're either having a panic attack, an anxiety attack, different kinds of behaviors, or and then the animal reads that cue. And the animal has been trained to respond to that in a certain way. And then they react and they change the behavior of the handler, the person who's walking or has that animal with them. And whether it's taking them to a safe place, grounding them so they're coming back to reality, or other kinds of behavior. Sometimes it's medical alarm, sometimes not only when to take your medicine, but an alarm clock, a pill reminder, and an emotional support animal. So what happens? I have a panic attack. I'm a person with a disability. I have my dog. It senses it and it comes and it rubs its body against me to ground me, or it licks my face. Now, if I have that dog and the only thing that dog does, let's just say it's Thor here, but Thor isn't trained, but I take great comfort and I have a diagnosed mental disorder, and the mere presence of Thor or Colonel reduces or eliminates the symptoms of my emotional or mental health. It doesn't do anything. And it's not the same as if an animal, you train your animal. My Jack Russell used to come up and lick my face all the time. And even if I have a mental disability, it doesn't matter. I didn't train and he's not responding. So that's really the difference. And the big difference is in housing, because emotional support animals in most states you do not have to permit them in any public or private spaces. But in housing, there's a special category.
Thank you, and great answer. Well, I'd like to take this turn and hear from you for a little bit. Can you talk with us about certain mental health symptoms or diagnoses that you think could be most supported by having a service animal?
Sure, and before that, I am a white female with dark hair up in the bun thing. My glasses on. My pronouns are she, her, hers. So the question was, what mental health disorders or symptoms can service animals or emotional support dog public. So I would say, Amy, the literature supports primarily mood disorders, depression, anxiety, PTSD, folks with developmental disabilities. But I would say that there can be value in helping folks with pretty much any sort of symptom. And the symptoms that they can help with are numerous. So Evelyn was talking about helping to notice when a panic attack is starting to come on and help that person be grounded. And I think it will help just for me to talk a little bit about my patients that have mostly emotional support dogs, but I do have a couple that have seizure disorders. But people with schizophrenia, with depression, with autism, and the things that they help with are having them feel more comfortable going out, having the support and comfort of somebody that is there. I have two people that have schizophrenia and they both have cats, and they're not technically emotional support animals, but they serve in that function. I have a person who has autism and schizophrenia who has a dog and allows her to get on planes, sort of stuff, allows her to get on planes and travel. So those are the areas that service dogs and support.
Thank you. Claudia, let's turn to you now and learn a little bit about Thor. Tell us a little bit about Thor and why you decided to have Thor join you.
Thor is an 8-year-old German Shepherd who he was supposed to be a police dog, but he didn't make it with that training. So I eventually, after his travels, he ended up with me. I decided to get him because when I first found out that you could have a service, like train your own service dog, then I was like, oh, that's really good. I didn't know that was a thing, and I knew that I would benefit from having him. So I when I found him, I knew he was mine. So I thought him.
And how long have you had it with you?
6 or 7 years.
Okay. Well, can you tell us a little bit about what work or task Thor does to support you?
Yeah, he does deep pressure therapy, tactile stimulation. So like he prevents self-harm. The deep therapy, pressure therapy is like grounding me. So when I have an episode, he will put his weight on me so that I will eventually be aware of where I'm at.
Thank you. And you also have Dash, who's a service dog in training. Tell us a little bit about Dash.
Yeah, right now he's 5 months old. Working, he's still learning lots of things. And he's, I don't know.
Tell us why you decided to have Dash join your family. What's the future plans?
So eventually I want to get him to full service dog, because Thor is getting older and I want him to retire with some time to be a dog, just, fully be a dog. And so when he retires, eventually I hope that Dash will take his place.
Thank you. And tell us a little bit about your description, English description, and the pronoun.
Oh, yep, sorry.
That is hard. It's hard to remember.
Hispanic female, long brown hair, pulled back, red shirt.
Thank you. Zach and Colonel, let's turn to you. Tell us why you decided to get Colonel.
Zach Fox, 6 foot tall, white, male, balding. That's about it. I think I'm well dressed. I got Colonel. My wife and I decided to train a service dog for the Puppy Day Foundation to train service dog for veterans. And as a veteran, I was like, what better way to get back to my community and also work with dogs. We were in rescue for a very long time and we were good at that. So we're like, we can maybe do this. And through the process of training Colonel, it was life-changing. So I was able to go and do certain things and I could do those things before, but I struggled. But helped me get to a point where I could go do those things. And so we, you know, I was told to apply for a service dog, and they awarded him to me. So it was quite a life-changing event, but it was never meant to go to the point where we were going to give, my wife and I were going to train him and give him to a veteran. It just so happened that the veteran that he helped was the trainer. So.
Thank you. And tell us in a little bit more detail about what Colonel does in terms of workers' tasks.
Just to touch on what Claudia said, is a lot of deep pressure therapy. For me, it's more about being aware, being less hypervigilant because I'm focused on something that looks like he looks. And to demonstrate for those out there, Colonel is a gorgeous golden retriever with a lab face, so he's got the short snout. So hopefully that answers your question.
Thank you, it does. Caleb Thomas, let's turn to you. The question for you is if you would talk a little bit about the kinds of information, the type of relationship you have to establish with the patient before you would recommend or help them with an accommodation course.
Well, sir, good afternoon, everyone, and everyone that's online. My name is Caleb Thomas. I am an African American gentleman, short hair, with glasses, wearing a white shirt. And to answer that question, the type of relationship that first off we start out with is the mental health therapist is starting with an initial assessment, and this is commonly known as a biopsychosocial assessment, which would determine the client's biological, psychosocial, and physical behavior, including in mental health diagnosis, including depression and anxiety, just to name a few. So we start out with that, and from there, I would then know, based off that diagnosis, that the client would be eligible for a service. And so it's very important, you know, learning about the service animals, because many times clients will come to our office seeking therapy before taking any medications. And as we'll probably get into a little bit later on today, service animals have been known, based off the research, to help decrease medications or possibly help them get to the point where they're not needing medications at all.
Thank you. So people are always confused about the process, right? They're asking for an accommodation. Maybe talk with us a little bit about your part in helping someone go through an accommodation process, either at work or maybe in the housing, to have their service animal or emotional support animal come into that place with them.
Yes, great question. So those accommodations, what we do, there is a specific form that individuals can find from the website, Commission of Civil Rights website. They can bring that form into me. We can help them fill that out, and they could take that form to their landlord to now be approved to have a service animal be with them at all times.
And tell us a little bit more of your role in that process. What are you doing as a mental health professional, kind of behind the scenes?
Yeah, well, the main thing is, you know, establishing a relationship, right? So I would potentially want to develop some rapport with the client. Again, have that initial assessment, and once the diagnosis has been determined, then filling out the form to approve that this individual certainly is positive for a service animal.
Thank you very much. So let's turn and talk a little bit about training. Len, we're going to start with you again on this one. Tell us about the type of training that's required. A lot of people think it has to be a highly professional training, which costs lots of money. Help us understand what the law requires.
It's pretty basic. Anybody can train the animal. An individual can do it, and they use a lot of the same behavior modification techniques that other people use. If you want your dog to wake you at a certain time or get medicine for you, then you train them and they can discuss a little bit more. There's also outfits, very professional, especially for guide dogs and others that are worth, tens of thousands of dollars. And that requires training up to a year and sometimes more, where the handler is in training with the animal because they have to establish a relationship and they have to make sure that the animal knows the cues and the needs of the person with a disability and how to respond to it and how to change their behavior. And also there's no proof or certification of training. If someone at a restaurant or the law school or the movies tries to say, or the bus, show me your certification or training, there is no requirement that you do that, and there is no ADA certification. But if you go on my website, I can sell you a really nice vest and a card for $49.95, which is not authorized by anybody, but it is an industry. And there are state and local laws about dogs in training. The ADA does not cover dogs in training. But the Iowa law does have a special section of law that says service dogs in training can go just about anywhere in the public or private businesses they could go. But it's only enforced by criminal prosecution. One thing to know is that the ADA and the laws don't forbid you from allowing other animals in. If you come to the law school, there are therapy dogs during finals, and they're not serving one individual. Everybody comes there, and it provides emotional support. We also have pets that come in. The reason you don't see that as often is because if you let a pet in or a therapy dog, you're going to be hard pressed to prevent another person who sees a pet in the restaurant. And that's the two worlds. Either it's a service animal or an emotional support animal, or it's a pet and it has no legal protection at all, no matter where you are. And that's the biggest issue. When someone approaches, is it a pet or is it some animal that's used by a person with a disability?
Thank you, Lynn. I'm gonna try and use this so people can hear me better. Oh, okay, that better? All right. So sorry. I'm not part of the mic world, I guess. So Doc, we're gonna turn to you and Colonel now. Tell us how you train a Colonel.
My wife and I trained Colonel through an ADI accredited, meaning Assistance Dogs International. Anybody at the kind of like the rule of service dogs and the organization that we use through the Puppy Jake Foundation, using positive training techniques and positive reinforcement. There's really, that's all we do. There's more. I would say within the training service dogs, there's more things that are like nuanced. You have to really dig into certain aspects.
Thank you. What for you was the hardest part of training?
Being consistent every single time, because at the time I was training, who's not my dog. So we have protocol that we follow on certain things. There's a certain aspect of it that you have to follow to the T, and if you don't, it can lead you. You're taking the public access test to really tell, like, okay, can my dog be on public? And those small nuances can really make a huge difference. So it's just the consistency aspect of things.
And how was it for you, knowing initially at least that Colonel was going to go to a different veteran?
Initially, I was okay with it, simply because this is what we decided to do. We wanted to give back to our community. We wanted to give back to the veteran community specifically. And I didn't want to, I almost felt like I was jumping ahead of the line. And the way that the board had put it is they didn't want to break the bond that was already there. Because Colonel might go to another veteran and not do as well. So it was a perfect match, and we still foster, so I don't feel as bad for taking care of.
Thank you. Let's pour into the conversation now. First off, just a reminder, do image description before answering the question, but I'm really interested in the life of a service animal, right? From puppy, all the puppy stuff that happens, then service animal training, service animal and lifelong training. Tell us just, help us understand that life cycle.
Great, so my name is Lindsay Fox. I am Zach's wife. I'm about 5'4", long brown, straight hair. I'm wearing a floral blouse with a red sweater. My pronouns are she, her. And so we started training Colonel. It was a great experience for me to give back to the veteran community. And I understand how veterans need great healthcare, and there's a hole, I think, in the need healthcare that they do receive. So this is my way of giving back to that. As far as training, you can see Miss Marilyn is still in training. She's not nearly as patient as the Colonel. She's getting there, she is younger. They're still dogs, so that's okay. We break our training into 5 different stages. So we essentially have puppies, and you kind of move into adolescence. And each we move our dogs with the Puppy Jake Foundation. We move them about every 6 months. So the dogs get used to different handlers. Colonel, we did talk for the full 2.5 years, which is very unusual, but you know that story is very unusual. So I've had Marilyn for about 6 months. We have some people that love puppy training. There's some people that love older dog training. I am one that has the patience for older dogs generally, and not puppies. But it's usually about a 2.5-year process. So it is a very long process.
And for you, what has been the hardest part of training, either Colonel or training your own?
It's the people. I can train dogs all day long. I've trained a lot of dogs. We've had a lot of fosters through our house, and they all have different personalities, and you can adjust to that. But when we're out in public, and especially living with someone with a service dog, training the public how to appropriately interact with the service dog is.
Is there anything else you'd like to share about Puppy Jake organization that you've all?
Yeah, so the Puppy Jake Foundation, we train well-bred service dogs for the veteran community specifically. So it is a nonprofit. Most of us are volunteers.
Thank you. Claudia and Zora, up to you. So tell us a little bit about how long and the process you used to train for.
So Thor had his basic training already since he was originally supposed to be a police dog, so I didn't have to worry too much about that. Just kind of went over, structured it up. Then, so after bonding with him and everything, then we started doing all the specific stuff we need. So we just same thing with how they do positive training. For me, some of the stuff I do is like lure him with treats to position him in placement while I was pretending to have a symptom or actually having a symptom. And then if he were to do that behavior when I'm not having a symptom, then he doesn't get like the treat. So he has to associate that behavior with the symptoms. So that way he learns that's what he's supposed to do.
And how long did that take before Thor began to kind of help you manage the symptoms?
Well, yeah, quite a while. It took a while. We did one thing at a time. So
But I think Thor heard this name.
yeah.
So I am here, I'm meant to be seen by other people. So tell us a little bit about after you trained for stop. It's a lifelong thing for Thor?
Lifelong. Yeah, consistency. Any big changes, like when we got our puppy, small changes like that can change his behavior. Lifelong training.
Thank you. Caleb? Can you talk with us a little bit about some examples of work or tasks that a service animal would do to assist somebody with mental health?
Certainly, again, Caleb Thomas with Thomas and Associates Counseling and Consulting programs are, some of those tasks are extremely important. Claudia's mentioned some as well, but another important task is retrieval. So if we think about different individuals having a panic attack, right? That could be so serious as to the point where an individual may need to call an ambulance. Sometimes the individual can't get to their phone, right? They may, not remember where their phone is, but having that service animal can bring the phone to the service animal so the individual can call 911. They're also able to do things such as turning. They're also able to do things such as turning lights on and off, and that's extremely important as well. Claudia mentioned the dog laying on top of her, also helping out with harming themselves. Other tasks, the dogs can help the individual kind of guide them if they're feeling lightheaded, right? So they don't fall and hurt themselves. So there's so many amazing tasks those animals are able to do.
Yeah, and I apologize, Alice, we're going to have to share the microphone. Unless Tyler's around, we can bring this another one. Okay. So Claudia, we're going to go back to you in 4. We're talking now about sort of the requirements for you as a handler when you're out in public with 4. Tell us a little bit if you use voice control, symbols, and how do you communicate with 4 in public? And hold the, sorry.
I use both hand signals, also voice commands, and like if we're at a movie, I don't want to be, speaking and interrupting any movie, so I'll use hand signals. He knows both, so I just use both.
So I'll try and speak louder. What is your responsibility when you're out in public?
Making sure I have control of him and that he's doing what he's supposed to be doing.
And when you say have control, tell us a little bit more. What does that mean to have control of us?
He's not going up to everybody. He's on my leash. He's paying attention to me. Not attacking anybody, growling at anybody, barking at anybody. Focusing on me and doing his job.
Thank you. And for Dash, that he's in training, what does that mean for Dash right now?
Right now, Dash, I'm trying to just get him used to the world. Exposing him to everything so that he is aware of everything, so that he's not scared when he starts going out and learning different things.
So then, what does this term under the control of the handler mean under the law?
Essentially means that a person can either through signals or a tether control and make sure the dog, and we're talking about a dog or a miniature horse in public, doesn't wander, doesn't essentially go wherever it wants to, that it doesn't bark repeatedly, depending on where you are, that it doesn't jump on people, that it doesn't bare its teeth and start biting. And for the most part, it's having a tether or harness or a leash. But as Claudia said, oftentimes that you can do voice commands. And there are times such as a veteran who has PTSD. And the dog will search out the apartment to make sure there is no one there. And they have to go through the apartment. They can allow the dog not to be tethered or leashed. And the dog will return to them. And that is a specific training technique for a person with that mental health issue. as well. And also that it's not pooping or peeing. And it can be a miniature horse as well. And there are other issues regarding that, but basically that has to do what the handler wants it and needs it to do. And I think the biggest issue is other people, probably not the animals, because most of the animals are trained to sit on command, not to react to the presence of people. And also not to bark, although a lot of times you'll see dogs jumping into carts at the shop. Trader Joe's called us and said, what's the policy on carts and what do we do? And that's the second question I think you're going to ask. What happens if the animal is out of control? And we just try to take care of this as a customer service issue, whether you're in the education industry or restaurant. What you want to do is you go, Claudia, Thor isn't quite Godzilla, but we can see getting a little animated. And maybe it's because there's another animal that it's reacting, or a child is coming and wanting to pet it. And then we'll say, can you please maintain control of the animal? And push comes to shove, I can say, your Thor's going to have to leave. But you can stay, or we can do shopping for you. We will accommodate your disability, not by allowing the animal with you, but by having a shopper for you or delivering, and at no extra charge as well. So those are some of the things that the person can do. And to set the stage is what happens when you come into the business, because they don't know whether it's a pet, whether Thor's just wearing one of those internet vests. And in the public, you can only ask 2 questions to determine if Thor or Colonel or Marilyn is a service animal. First one is, do you require this animal because of a disability? And if they say yes, then the second one is, what tasks or work does the animal perform for you? And once they answer that, you have to let them pass. But you don't ask those 2 questions if it's readily apparent that the person needs the animal. So if you see someone with a vision impairment and you don't ask. You just let them go and you presume. And the law says you let them pass. And the tricky part is what happens after the animal's inside. And then it's a matter of vigilance. And when it starts jumping on people, then you're saying, well, this may not be the service animal. And that's what most people want to do. But if you exclude, the only thing you can do is say the animal has to be somewhere else. And if it's in hospitals and others, then you have to make arrangements in advance, typically, to get someone else to mind the animal or for the animal not to accompany you.
So Len, you mentioned miniature horses, and I know I've been doing disability work about 20 years now. I have never had a situation where someone came to me and said they were using a miniature horse or wanted to. So help us understand, like, why would somebody want a miniature horse instead of a dog?
Okay, I never knew horses. I grew up in New York. I knew subways, but my daughter knows horses. This is a miniature horse. It's a particular breed. And no offense to Thor and Marilyn, but they have a longer lifespan than most dogs. They can live 25 to 30 years. They're easier to groom and they shed fewer allergens. There are cultures and religions that consider dogs unholy, and so they will not use them. Culturally, it's a taboo as well. They're about 24 to 30 inches, 34 inches high, and they weigh 71 to 100 pounds. So it's a big dog. If you're thinking about that, they're strong and they can push and pull objects for people. And they offer a lot of mobility and stability assistance. They also have really excellent eyesight and 350-degree peripheral vision and night vision. So they do a lot of guiding for people with vision impairments. And they don't have to poop as often as dogs. As my 8-year-old or 9-year-old granddaughter would say now.
One last question, before we leave you, you mentioned initially that, any dog can be a service dog. What if you go into a business and the business has a big sign that says pit bulls or some other type of breed prohibited? Can they do that?
Okay, but both the ADA and the state law and the housing say you cannot impose breed restrictions. And if a town does, and there have been many cities and towns that do, because pit bulls and other breeds, there have an incident where someone was bitten. And what the people have to do then is ask the city or government to make a reasonable accommodation by modifying their policy for a person with a disability who has a pit bull, who is trained. And also in housing, that means an emotional support animal, whether or not they perform a task. And you can have a rabbit, a dog, a capuchin monkey, not a kangaroo, that's already been held, but those are the kind of animals, cats, rabbits, and those. So that's essentially what the law says. And as you can see, the law and the real world sometimes don't bear really close resemblance to each other. And a lot of times you just ask the business in advance or find out what their policies are.
Thank you. Let's turn now and talk with Zach and Colonel. Zach, tell us what do you want people to know about animals and people that rely on them?
Jack Fox, writer, and then the Colonel is fiction. Pronouns are he, him, animals.
Yes, what do you want people to know about animals and people that rely on them?
Just that we are people. And if I am going about my daily business and I am stopped multiple times trying to get from point A to point B, just so someone can say, hey, that's really cute dog, and then tell me about their dog or the dog that they had that died. And I love hearing those stories. I don't. It's a joke. I do struggle with that. This is kind of where my wife comes in and says, hey, how about we just hand you a card and we're on our way. And do you have anything else to add to that?
Yeah, I would say the same thing. It's just people with service animals are just people with disabilities trying to live their daily life. So we do get stopped a lot, whether we're training or that we're just that. We know the dogs are cute, we understand the dogs are cute, we love them more than you, I assure you. But sometimes we do get tired of being stopped when I'm just going to Target trying to get milk, and I get blocked 5 times on the way down and hear about everybody's dead dogs.
So Lindsay or Zach, whoever wants to answer this, what's your advice for all of us when you're out in public with Colonel and Melanie? Anyone to start?
Yeah, Zach always says just to call Colonel a beautiful medical device, because that's what they are. If you have to say something to us, then just comment on how cute the dog is, but keep moving. Don't expect me to stop. Sometimes I do. A huge part of my position is to stop and educate, and a lot of times I have a lot more patience than Zach does with that. Happy to stop and talk about the dogs, talk about the training, gush about the PuppyJ Foundation, all the great things we do, but most of the time I'm just trying to go to the gym, get a decent workout in. So if you just give us a little bit of time and space, we really appreciate it.
So I noticed both Marilyn and Colonel have one has service animal and training, I think, and one service dog, pet. We learned today that's not required. So why do you have both your dogs wear those vests?
Yeah, so with the PuppyJ Foundation, we are ADI certified, which is Assistive Dogs International. So they do recommend that we vest our dogs. We absolutely legally do not have to, but we do because it's easier for us. When I'm out in public and our dogs are clearly marked, I get stopped a lot less. I can take Marilyn into Target and she will behave equally. If I take her vest off, that doesn't mean she's not working. She's working all the time. Even if we're in the yard and I recall her out of play, she's supposed to come to me most of the time. But it's a lot easier on the handler to have them vested.
Thank you. Zach, anything you want to add?
Yeah, I made that mistake once. We went into Shields without a vest on, and I think I was stopped 4 different times before I got to where I was going. And I felt kind of silly saying, well, he's working right now, so not right. Okay, I don't want to stop and talk about it. And the look on their face is like, well, why not? You know, because they don't know that he's a service dog. And maybe they wouldn't, I don't know.
So it sounds like it's potentially very draining to be out in public and have to be an educator of why you have Colonel, why he's wearing the vest, what he does. It gets tiring. It sounds like.
We get different events, we are exhausted. So yeah, it's but it's for the greater good, and we're getting older and we're always gonna be tired, so.
None of my lifetime. Okay. Let's go back to Lynn. Lynn, we've been talking about where animals can go. Where is it not permissible to bring the service in, if anywhere?
Okay, so if it is a service animal and not a pet, it can go in any area in the public, where the public can go, where the participants in programs or services can go, attendees, customers, anywhere that the person is allowed. I mean, we had a lot of this with brewery tours and other people calling us, what do we do, in stadiums. So that's the general rule. And there are places where the animal cannot accompany the handler. And basically, most of them relate to the need for a sterile environment. People can go into hospitals, they can go into emergency rooms and have the animal with them. But with burn units, surgical areas, then they are not permitted. Also in employment, there are sterile environments as well. So we've had clients who work for chip manufacturers and nothing goes in. They're bubbled and gloved, and an animal will not be able to accompany them. Also, the Occupational Safety and Health Administration has rules with regard to dogs in kitchens. And so we have chefs, but they will have to leave the animal away from the food handling station. Anywhere else they can go, but not that as well. And there are public health rules about swimming pools as well. And sometimes there are wards or clinics that are specifically for dander-free treatment, and especially health clinics. Then they're saying you're not. You can't say as a cab driver, I'm an animal-free taxi driver, but on those specialty wards you can. Also, first, I'm an Iowan now. I've been here 33 years. And the state fair and the county fair and the animal exhibits. And we work with national parks. And you are not allowed, or they can stop you from bringing a dog that is a natural prey animal to the animals that are there. I have to chase sheep one year here with my friends, and we learned that they're so high strung that if they see a dog, then they can lose weight. They won't win any competitions. My daughter was in 4-H, and so they can restrict. They can't stop you from coming, but you won't be able to bring the dog close enough to the animals. And other than that, there are very few places where the animal is not allowed to go if it is behaved and it's not posing a direct threat to anyone else. And there are sometimes programs. There one in Iowa in particular to show when having a dog or a miniature horse would be a fundamental alteration of the program. That means it is contrary to the very nature of the program itself. The Department of Justice says a dog in a swimming pool is a fundamental alteration. Illinois has a state law that allows a person who needs a dog to swim and assist them physically is allowed to. So states are allowed and local to go beyond the ADA. And the second one will give you more of a sense of when a program is just not suited or for the person and the animal. And there was a case in Iowa, and it was a jury decision. And essentially, it was a handler who wanted to bring her guide dog, and it was a program for the Iowa Department of the Blind. And the program's intention and the entire purpose was to have the individual learn how to negotiate the world and live without the animal. So that's sort of a fundamental alteration. The entire gist of the program was for that. And she claimed it was discrimination and they should modify their policies and practices. But it took a jury trial and ultimately she was not allowed to do that. She was not allowed to bring the animal, so she wasn't allowed to participate in the program. She withdrew from it. She could have done it without the animal.
So then how do you handle what seems on the surface to be kind of a conflict between the rights of a person with a disability to bring their service dog into a place of public accommodation, and the public accommodation saying, everyone here is afraid of this dog, or we all have allergies, and we can't have this animal in here because of the reaction that the folks have to it. How do you handle that?
Okay, yeah, and that the Department of Justice and Housing, the general rule is that you do not stop a person coming in here because other people have allergies or have a fear of animals. But the idea is you're supposed to, it's customer service. You go to the person and you try to arrange their schedules so they're not together or they're shopping in different places. And sometimes it's sort of, in housing, it becomes a rock and a hard place. But not meaning that you're going to have someone who moves in with an animal and there's going to be a tenant who has a strong reaction to allergies, and the allergy rises to the level of a disability, because not every person with an allergy is a person with a disability. It has to significantly limit their ability to breathe or some other major life activity. So it is a balancing act. And if you want to see the worst legal opinion ever written on this notion, just read Clark versus Cohen, an Iowa Supreme Court case, where they didn't know how to reconcile what happened. And so it really is a matter, whether it's a restaurant or the law school or bringing someone into the clinic, you know, as a client, and they have an animal, we have a student with strong allergies. What I would do is say, okay, we're going to assign you to a different client because there's no reason to endanger you. Sometimes it's you do what's best. Be a mensch is what we're always told. Go beyond what the law requires and solve a problem, and don't just do it as if the ADA didn't exist. I always ask, what would you do if the law wasn't in place? And most of the time people work it out.
So let's say I'm refused entry into a business with my service animal. What do I do?
Okay, you have many doors you can open. The first thing I would go is to the business, if I could. But most of the time they're just, if they're refusing, they're refusing. The second is you can file a complaint with the Iowa Civil Rights Commission. You can file a complaint with the US Department of Justice, because they enforce the Americans with Disabilities Act. The State Civil Rights Commission has a state mini ADA, if you want to call it that. And if it is a public accommodation, then typically under state law, you have to file an administrative complaint first. You cannot go directly to court. But if you're going under the ADA, you can go directly to federal court. But the issue is that law, if it's with a private business, does not allow you to get any money. You don't get damages, money damages. All you can do is go back and enforce the rule and have them accept your animal. And we find out that most people don't want to go back to that restaurant because they were so poorly treated. So sometimes the state law, you have to choose which one will give you what you want and which one will do it quickly. We've done boycotts. That was the quickest thing we ever did. someone said we're not having the animals. So it was a small town and everybody just picketed the grocery store. The grocery store said, okay, we don't need court, we need business. So
Okay.
try to be lawyer free if you can.
Thank you, yes, the lawyer free is.
But sometimes court's the only way to do it.
Jack and Chris, I was gonna know when you.
Probably, biggest thing for me, was any sort of, like, I get really high vigilant. So if I'm out and about and I'm just, you know, making sure someone's, a long time ago, I would have had a problem with anyone sitting behind me. Having Colonel understanding, that I can focus on him, it helped me not. Don't get me wrong, I still get hypervigilant from time to time, but it's for completely separate reasons that are really out of the control of anyone. But for me, it's the deep pressure therapy that works for me almost every single time, or just having him close to me. It just makes everything kind of melt away for me. Which does, in essence, give my wife a little bit of freedom, because she doesn't have to, I don't know, I can be a lot. So most veterans can, and they can't admit that.
Would you feel comfortable demonstrating a command or a work or task that?
I can either, if I'm, you know, in a shopping center or something like that, I will, and there's just a lot of people, I will ask Colonel to do what's called an across. Colonel. All right, wake you up. Pressure, it does, I don't know what it is about the pressure on the legs, it helps, it eases anxiety. He's wanting me to touch him. He's gorgeous to look at, so he's like he really helps with the serotonin level. Hopefully that answers the question.
Yeah, thank you. Claudia, when you're out in public, how would you like folks to react to the work?
There's a lot of baby noises, kittens, a lot of what's his name, just constant attention, and it's like the same as they were talking about earlier. Lindsay was saying it just becomes a lot, and it'd be nice if people would just smile and be on their way. And they work.
You talked about Thanksgiving.
Thanksgiving, well,
Okay, tell us.
I
about
did,
Thanksgiving.
I was telling him a story earlier about Thanksgiving. Our last Thanksgiving was horrible. We went to a restaurant and the waitress there did not want dogs there. And she kept trying to, say he was in the way, and eventually she ended up kicking him. And I mean, I was in tears, and it was just a horrifying experience. We'll never go back there again. But yeah, I mean, we had people treat us pretty badly.
And how would you want people to treat you? And for
Just smile and keep walking. I usually, try to just walk away if I can, and if I can't, eventually my husband will step in if I have lost all my patience, or I'll just say, please leave me alone, we're working.
Thank you. Let's turn now to our last section, believe it or not, and talk about the impact of these animals on your life. So, Zach and Carol, we're going to start with you. Tell us how Carol has changed your life.
As I should have mentioned before, I didn't realize just how much stress I put on my wife just because I am who I am. Combat veterans are a different breed, and people think they see they see and interact with me, and they're like, oh, you seem fine. Like, well, there is definitely a reason that I have a service dog. I do struggle in those large crowd environments, and she was the one that was keeping me in the right frame of mind. And now and what we always, my wife and I talk about this within the puppy Jake model, is the fact that you can't just have a service dog. You have to have a solid support system. You have to have a strong spouse. You have to have someone like mental health and therapy. You have to have, there's so many different things that you can do to better your mental health and mental well-being, that use those services, use everything that you possibly can, and you have this the solid foundation of care that, had I not met my wife, I don't know I'd be in this. I'll just leave it at that. So very appreciative of everything she has done for me, but
So we learned, because of what Claudia shared, that the life cycle of a service animal is forever. Do you plan on having another service animal after Colonel?
absolutely. I debated on answering that the way that I did before, but the simple fact is that I loved training Colonel. It brought my wife and I closer together. It's something that we just really are passionate about. We love doing it. And I don't see why I can't have like a Colonel part 2. So just I'll save up. They're about $20,000 to $25,000. So or I can just do it her way. Claudia's way, excuse me.
Claudia's way. Lindsay, how about you? How would you describe the impact of Colonel on your independence and your families and your family life?
That gives me a lot of credit, maybe it is due, but it has completely changed our dynamic. I work outside the home, and I used to be essentially on call all the time as I was struggling with anything. I just had to be available to come home. I do work close to home, and I've changed where I used to work farther from home, and I shortened my commute to be closer to home for my family, but for him as well. If he were to need anything, I just need to be close, and now Colonel's kind of in charge, which is great. I that would never go to the store without me, never go. There's no way you go out to a restaurant or anything without someone in our trusted circle. So I just always had to be there, and now I can go out and do whatever I want because I can use sense of freedom. So it's not just that that's been affected. Our kids are amazing advocates for people with disabilities, specifically that can, and specifically those with service dogs. So we've educated pretty much the entire community around us as well. So I think we've changed outside of our family as well, but it's definitely changed everybody in our neighborhood and family, which is great. It's the hardest part, like I mentioned earlier, is just educating the people about service dogs and appropriate service dog behavior and what to expect and all that stuff.
Thank you. So, anything you want to add after hearing what Lindsay had to say?
You just find out real fast who becomes a friend and who becomes an acquaintance when you realize that they aren't dog people. So it's just, I'm not going to go out and put Colonel. Like there's a kid in my daughter's class that, kind of touching on what Len was speaking about earlier, but there was a kid in that is terribly afraid of dogs. So I, nonetheless, I don't bring Colonel around him out of respect for him. So I just hang out on my own.
So you had shared a story about the very young 6-year-old student when you're doing a presentation. Share with us her reaction.
Oh, wow. She was so, she was just an emotional wreck. She was sobbing during most of our presentation. I'm kind of asking if she was okay. Well, she just loves dogs, and they were so cute. She could not contain her emotions. And I've never, other than my wife, I've never experienced love for an animal like that. It was kind of moving, but that's that.
Thank you, Doug. Claudia, tell us what's the most surprising thing you've learned or the most surprising thing you've gained from having Thor in your life?
I've gained, so I used to go end up in the ER, like you were saying, about every couple months. I was vomiting almost daily. I hardly ever left the house. All that has changed. I mean, so there's a huge difference in life that I've gained a lot of independence from having. That was a lot of stuff.
And how has it changed your family?
I don't have to depend on having my kids or my husband go with me everywhere. So they can do what they want and they'll have their support. You
Tell us a little bit about how you're gonna transition Dash and have forward going to retirement.
Yeah, once Dash is completely ready to be on his own, to make it less traumatic for Thor, since he does go with me everywhere. I'm gonna gradually leave him home like once a week for like a month, and then twice a week for a month, and so slowly, so that way eventually he'll learn that he's a home dog, and that's just the one going in.
Thank you. Kayla, tell us a little bit about your journey as a mental health professional with service animals. How has your understanding of service animals changed, and how do you think that's impacting your ability to kind of work with the patients that come to you?
Yes, certainly. Again, Caleb Thomas with Thomas and Associates Counseling Consultant located here in Iowa City, Iowa. Again, pronouns he, him, the American. Hanson. And so getting back to the question, as mental health therapists, it is so important that we are continuously learning how to help our clients get better in various ways. And so again, this is pretty new to me, learning about service animals. And I'm very excited, very honored to learn that this is another support that I can encourage my clients to inform them. Have you thought about getting a service animal or training if they already have a pet already? Have you considered training and knowing that they can do it on their own? Or if there's other resources that I can work with this great team of individuals to help them find as well. So that is extremely important. And so as I continue to learn and become more educated about these service animals, I will be able to provide that recommendation. And again, I'm just really amazed with all that I have learned with all of these wonderful tasks these service animals can do. So also I wanted to just take a moment to say thank you to Zach for his service, right? And we are just honored and grateful for him, as well as his wife, you know, because they're one and they're service animals. And just to hear these amazing stories. Clyde, just mentioning, you know, again, as a mental health therapist, I'm always empathetic because you never know what someone goes through, what has been their background, what they've experienced. And so knowing that body can now go out as a mental health therapist, that helps me. Knowing now that Zach the decrease in medications. Also, just wanted to commend Zach for recommending for veterans and others the importance of it is a team, right? We mentioned, you know, he has service animals, but as well as other support, as well as many times it may be medications. Many times it's going and seeing a therapist, right? And so having, you know, as much support as possible so individuals can go out, deal with the anxieties, the phobias and the fears and the depression and the various symptoms that they may be dealing with on day-to-day struggles. So it's just nice to hear it from someone else, because I think many times people think, oh, you just recommending therapy because you're a therapist. I will say I have my own therapist as well as a therapist. And so it's just not me talking, right? This is very, very important. And so I will recommend, for individuals that may be struggling to think about seeking out a service animal. And I'm sure we'll address how individuals who may be watching online, or even those who came to watch today, how they can get a service animal.
Thank you. The last question that I have for the panel, then we're going to open it up for questions, and then go to you, Dr. Tate. Last question. Talk with us, maybe we'll pass the mic down as we're good. Tell us about your patient and maybe the different outcomes that you experienced after getting the service.
Yeah, and first of all, I wanted to say that I had permission to so I'm very sensitive to everything that you guys think about people being annoying. First of all, I really want to second what Zach said about it. You didn't say these words, but it takes a village. Because I do think that there may be an opportunity to decrease meds for people that have service animals, but I don't want that to people to hear, oh, if I can't decrease meds, then I'm not doing something right, or I don't have the right dog, or I'm not, going to enough therapy, because sometimes people just need medication. And they need a service dog, and they need therapy, and they need to try to avoid substances. So it's not just a one answer, it is a individual response. So it really depends on the individual. But what I would say the outcome is of most of the experiences that I have with patients, it has improved their quality. So I just think that's really important. I don't want anyone leaving thinking if I have a certain symptom, I don't need medication. And I'm a psychiatrist who tries to find out like meds, I like to get people off meds, but they do have a purpose, and some people just need meds. Yeah.
And so, Dr. Tate, having a service animal, does that for you change your ability to assist somebody in managing their symptoms versus someone who doesn't have a service animal?
Yeah, and I'm gonna clump in, even though I know it's service animal and emotional support dogs, but I do think it improves people's quality of life. So medications can control core symptoms to a degree. There's no perfect method for anything. Therapy can help a lot of symptoms. There's no perfect therapy for a lot of things, but I think that service animals are another tool to help people increase their quality of life and to increase their comfort, and especially if people are alone, they don't have a support system. That having an animal provides so much, support and love and the tail wagging and that kind of thing. No med therapy will help. So.
Thank you. And then I saw your face light up, so I want to give you a chance.
Yeah.
And then you've done this work for a long
Well,
time.
just talking more about the quality of life and following up on this, because I think it's a misconception that the system is seamless and a person can bring their animal with them regardless of where they go. And there are different rules for housing, because the Fair Housing Act permits someone to have a service dog. They may ask for a miniature horse. And under the law, they can have another trained animal. And it can be a cat, it can be a capuchin monkey, it can be a parrot, it can be whatever animal you need, bless you, that will perform a task. So what happens when that person tries to go outside their home and they try to come to school or they go to a restaurant. Well, the restaurant only has to allow their service dog to accompany them or a miniature horse, unless you live in Cedar Rapids and Marion. Then, under that local law, then you can bring any animal that's trained as well as a dog or horse, because it's just those two jurisdictions that we kept the old law. Then you try to bring your emotional support animal on the bus, and they say this is a pet. You cannot bring this animal on the bus, although many bus systems do that and they allow you to bring it in a carrier. And sometimes bus drivers just look the other way anyway. And then you try to go to healthcare, right? You go to a doctor's office and she says, well, the dog or the miniature horse only. Yet the person who provides you the greatest mental health relief and symptoms and comfort, you cannot bring with you unless they allow you to, because it's considered a pet. Then you go to work. And the same thing applies, although in school and oftentimes people will go beyond the ADA and they will allow an employee a reasonable accommodation with an emotional support animal, but they won't call it a formal ADA accommodation. It's just that they value that employee, and just an employee may have a seasonal affective disorder. Instead of having the lamp, they are allowed to bring their emotional support dog that doesn't perform any other task, but they can refuse it if they want. You go to school, no emotional support animals, and it's the same thing. Airports. The Air Carrier Access Act just says service dogs now. If you want to bring anyone else, they fly as a pet and you pay a pet charge. And that law was changed after so many customers said the peacocks were coming on board and the turkeys, and people were abusing the system. But they were also charging $300 to bring your pet. So that was an incentive for people to claim that their animal was an assistance animal. So that's really it. It's not seamless. And that's something that my friends and clients have to look out for. They have to anticipate how they're going to get around town and who is going to allow them in and who's going to shut them out. So.
Thank you, Lynn. So I have a question that's come in, and we'll start with this one, but I do want to invite everyone who's here to ask a question. So this, I'm going to have Claudia go around, but the question is, after service dog is considered retired, does it stay with its original handler? Or do you think about that?
I personally am going to keep my dog. I don't see any reason to get rid of him. I would hope that people would keep their dog. I mean, you've bonded with that animal for so long, and I think it'd be traumatic to get rid of it.
Thank you. And Zach and Lindsay, how about the two of you?
I think that I would shy away from giving that person a dog to begin with. If they made a comment like that, I'd say, no, they performed that service for you. You know, they're not trash. They are a family member at that point, and they should be treated as such.
I'd like to open up for questions here. Like, you have a question? Let me bring the microphone to you. There you go.
Thank you. This presentation has been really informative, so thank you for that. We have a son who is 32 years old who's been sick with a very severe schizoaffective disorder for 16 years. It's been a nightmare. Over the years, in various community settings, we have approached providers to try to work on getting a service dog or an emotional support animal. And I hear what you're saying about it all being legal. I will tell you that what we've been met with most is resistance, to the point where it's been very difficult to even start the idea of it. What advice do you have? Our son is currently at the state hospital. He's been there for the past year and a half. He is stabilizing, but I personally would love to have him get a service dog. to give them a chance for success in the community in the long run. I'm open to opinions.
Who would like to start? Len, do you want to start?
Sure.
All right. Coming to you.
Okay. First called Disability Rights Iowa. That's and Kathleen. Second,
Do that as a parent.
yes. You can. Is your son under a guardianship? Okay. Is the institution just saying he may not have a emotional support animal?
We have not approached the state hospital, but all the other prior ones have said no, they wouldn't be open to it because they were worried about other clients' allergies and concerns.
Okay.
If I just help, but are you
Please.
saying that the clinicians won't help him get a service dog, or the hospital won't allow the dog in?
Clinicians and agencies is what I would tell you. Because you know, you're dealing with community providers, group homes.
Yeah,
et cetera, et
yeah,
cetera.
okay.
Yeah, HUD's pretty specific about, and group homes are subject to the Fair Housing Act. And also a lot of the state institutions, the dormitories are subject to the Fair Housing Act. And there are, to just put it blunt, drop dead rules about allergies and what HUD would do if they came in. So one is you can call HUD and just say, this is what's going on as well. And they're refusing. First, I'd ask the state institution, because there are institutions where you cannot bring an animal, jails and prisons, because they're saying you're not going to need the animal while you're here, and we're not going to allow it for legitimate safety reasons. But other in a housing setting, congregate or otherwise, the mere fact that other people may have allergies or fear them, there are ways that they can make sure that the animal and the other patients are accommodated as well. Because first thing, it's your son with a disability. If there's a documented need for it, and his therapist says an emotional support animal is needed, and you're going to need written verification about the disability and the need for the animal and that particular animal sometimes, as Caleb and Jody Tate have said as well. And then you can call DRI, you can call me. A lot of times it's calling, we end up speaking with the Attorney General, because they're the ones who oversee each institution. What center is it?
Independence.
Okay, in the Mental Health Institute. Okay, and the more secure the institution, the greater restrictions they will impose on animals for legitimate safety concerns. So it's not as simple as he's just living there. So maybe we can speak afterward, or you can give me a call, or Catherine.
So we have, thank you. Anybody else want to comment on that? We have another question that's come in. So the question is, as a handler, and you're out in public, you get all these questions. What advice do you have? There's this feeling that you have to improve, right? That it's your animal, it's a service animal. What can you do about that situation practically, if anything? So you're not in that situation that's questioning you all the time. You know, you go to Target and someone comes up to you and says, hey, we don't need this service animal, you got leave. What's your advice for this person?
Yeah, I can take that one. We have lots of fosters in the Puppy J Foundation that I kind of mentor and help through this process. And my best advice is just to know the two questions that they can ask. I believe Len talked about those earlier, what they're allowed to ask and answer them and keep moving. Right, sometimes we have to tell people what questions they're allowed to ask, which is kind of an awkward situation. But just know your questions, know what they can and can't ask. Honestly, we are very rarely stopped. We have been stopped once, and I think it was at a restaurant in Des Moines in the last, 3-4 years we've been doing this. And almost always it's someone that just isn't educated enough to know what the laws are. This is a particular restaurant that their patio was dog friendly, so when we walked inside, they were uncomfortable with that. another member of their staff corrected them very quickly and said that these people are allowed to be in here, and then they seated us and they were very nice to us the rest of the time.
Yeah, he asked us, recently he told us that, we could not have dogs inside. I said, oh, good, because he is a medical device. And my wife and I just kind of kept walking and knowing that we could legally be in there. And then actually another server came over and was like, you guys could just have a seat. And, it just.
Well, as handlers, just know your law.
Absolutely.
We know it really well because of course we train, and we train for an organization that, fundraises a lot. So we want to make sure we put on a good image, all that. But knowing your law, knowing the questions and just smiling, and like Len talks about like customer service, we're also, I'm a trainer, I'm not a disabled person training a dog. So I need to provide good customer service, for the image for people with service dogs as well. I'm very aware of that.
So before, I'm gonna let Len answer this too, but you had mentioned, keep your mic up one second.
Keep it. Yeah.
You had both mentioned earlier this morning, the cards that you give out. Tell us a little bit about these cards.
Yeah, so the Puppy Jake Foundation, we have trading cards for all of our dogs. Obviously, they all have very different personalities. Marilyn has a big one. She's a character. So we hand out trading cards that have some information on them about the dog. Kids love them, of course. And then Zach and I carry business cards, and we've provided business cards to other fosters as well that have a QR code on the back for ADA law. So you can easily give that out. And it has a super cute picture of the dog on the front. So if a kid is reaching for my dog in training, I'm like, oh, hi, thank you for your interest. Here's a card, don't touch my dog. It just provides like a physical distraction from them as well. And everybody loves a cute card. When we drive around town now, I go to every coffee shop and Ankeny where we live, and everybody has Colonel's card up on the window because everybody thinks she is so cute. So they collect them, and it also educates as well. It says on there, please don't pet all over them and things like that.
Thank you. And Len?
Well, the same thing for IDs, or you don't have to show an ID when you get on a bus, but sometimes just showing a card. The driver says, okay, and they know you and they let you on. And there are 3 magic words we used to just tell people when anyone ever questions. All you do is say the ADA says, and then you fill in the blanks. Most of it is customer service training, and we do a lot for corporations, and it just doesn't filter down all the time. But a lot of times we give the person who's the gatekeeper those cards to say, here's what you do. And if the person has a hidden disability or invisible, like a seizure disorder or mental, then you can ask the questions. Otherwise, just let them through, let the dog through. And then if something happens and the animal does something that disturbs other people or threatens them, then you can decide what you want to do. So.
Thank you. Well, I see we are back now. Our conversation is coming in. Rapid fire conversation. I'm sure our panelists will be here for a little bit longer if you want to come up and chat with them afterwards. So let me do a couple of thank yous before we end our conversation today. I want to give a big thanks to all of our amazing co-sponsors. We had 5 co-sponsors for this event. They're all listed on our event website, so you can find out more about each one of them. The little description and the logo is on there. I'd like to thank our entire team at Disabilities Iowa. These kinds of events are always a team event, both for our team and our community. So thank you, everybody. I want to thank our board and our Family Advisory Council. I'd like to thank Life Corporation for the Great American Sign Language education today, and then Deaf Services Unlimited for the captioning that we. And of course, none of this would happen, right, without our amazing 6 panelists and our 4 dogs, 2 service animals and 2 animals in training. So I was talking yesterday about this is the largest panel I've ever tried to moderate, and I've never moderated a panel with animals. So thank you. I feel like it was pretty good. We didn't have any disruptions. So thank you, everybody. Thanks everyone here. Thanks everyone that's joined us virtually in the community satellite. Please remember to complete your evaluations. We want to know what you liked, what we could have done better or differently. And we also make sure that we give you your CLE and some credit. So thank you all, and I hope you join us again.